are linear actuators becoming full mechatronic subsystems rather than just mechanical parts? Is this something that you are seeing throughout industry? And add to that, I'll ask the full question first, and then you can break it down for me. And how does that shift, if you agree with that, how does that shift affect telematics' role in the motion control ecosystem?
So the architecture of the mechatronic subsystem for us really falls into two categories. We think about two categories of customer, devices and equipment, and think about mobile, right? Versus factory floor. Think about factory automation. The limitations around space and weight are a lot different when you think about devices and equipment and mobile versus factory floor, where you might not have some of those limitations around space and weight. So certainly mechatronic subsystems are becoming more popular, right? But it's probably more popular in the devices and equipment, right? Think about mobile. And we see it a little bit more intense in that particular segment of the market rather than factory floor, where again you've got a few more options in how you can lay out your architecture. So where the architecture needs to be tight, needs to be compact, has limitations on space and weight, you're definitely thinking about a mechatronic subsystem and optimizing that subsystem. In terms of what that means for us, it means kind of stretching our wings a little bit. Um, we're not a controls manufacturer, but we definitely know we have to fit, right? We want our customers to select the best controls. We want our customers to select the best actuator. And we design our actuators to make sure that they fit into that architecture really, really well. So that's the way we behave, is making sure we understand the big picture, first of all, making sure we understand how we fit, and making sure the customer knows how to optimize the performance based upon those parameters.
All right. Okay. So when all is said and done, is motion intelligence moving into the axis itself or staying in the controller? So really what I want to get at here is, how much automation through sensing, diagnostics, and optimization do you expect to migrate into the actuator?
Yeah, so force sensing and positioning sensing is there, and you would definitely making actuators more intelligent. The diagnostics piece is really interesting as well, and I think lots of people are experimenting with that. I think it's a little bit immature yet. Looking at temperature and vibration and understanding what the impact or what that data means for actuator life and actuator performance, really important. And it varies by actuator. So there's some magic there in making sure you understand what those inputs are and what they mean for actuator life and performance.